Okay, I have to. It's telling me that I have to limit the length here of this recording to 15 minutes. So there's much more to say about it than this, but I'm just going to try and summarize and say what needs to be said. My good friend Harry Essex passed away this week. There's not going to be a formal funeral for Harry Essex. So this is a video eulogy for Harry Essex. Harry Essex passed away this week. I've not seen the autopsy report yet, but I can say with a fair degree of certainty that the reason for his death was alcoholism. He had two psychiatric problems that fed off each other. One of them was schizoaffective disorder caused by overuse of psychedelic substances. The other was alcoholism. And by the way, it is by far the worst cases of alcoholism I've ever seen. I've never seen a human being drink like that. He was somebody that I met in college when I was 19 years old. I met him at a cafe called Alt Coffee. We went to the same school together, which was Eugene Lang College in New York. And we hit it off pretty well. Got invited by him to go to a party. I think I ended up sleeping in his floor, but I ended up getting invited by him to go to a party, which was the first time I'd ever been to a loft party in Williamsburg. It's the East Village. Okay, the East Village had existed. The East Village had a long history of the Velvet Underground and the Ramones and the Beatniks and all this stuff. But there was this other new art neighborhood that I'd never heard of. That was the new spot in town. It was Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and Harry had an apartment there, and that was my first exposure to the culture of Williamsburg, which was a relatively new phenomenon, I think, at the time that people were over there, and he, yeah, he, I guess it was he was really involved with like art and literary scenes of the 90s and 2000s in different ways. He was very distinct from other people within those kinds of scenes in terms of what his interests were. He was very, very inclined towards mysticism, and he was obsessed with the field of comparative mythology. In college, and at Eugene Lang, everybody was there tossing theory and post-structuralism down everybody's throats. Harry had almost no interest in that at all. He was inclined towards stuff that was more related to like Carl Jung, things like that was more where his interest lay. And he had his two drugs of choice. I didn't see him do heroin. I didn't see him. I think I remember him saying that he couldn't stand heroin, which was another drug that a lot of people were using at the time. I don't recall him being that into cocaine. His two drugs were psychedelics. Like he would do a lot of mushrooms. He'd do a lot of LSD and stuff like that. And also he was big drinker. He liked to hang out at the bars a whole lot. But he hung out with some fairly, I mean, his friends, towards the end of his life, he was living, before he became homeless. Well, at the end of his life, he was homeless, but before that, he was living with Paul Richard, the famous painter, for a little while in Paul Richard's studio. So there's a couple of writers and poets that Colin Dodds, Peter Thompson, who was general editor of Cherie, Corno Mag. He lives up in Reno. Or I don't know if he's still living in Reno, but he was writing for the Reno Review for a long time. That was a good friend of Harry's. Danny Jock, who does the Talk to Me series live on on Live Leaks. That was actually a very, very close friend of Harry's. So he was not. I mean, he was definitely a very interesting entity at the beginning, but his decline into substances, towards the end, it was more just tragic and frightening to be around towards the end, and but he was something else. He was a different guy. He was definitely a unique cat, as they say. But I think also the other inspiration or influence is probably more accurate word to use that he had for me, was that in recent years I've moved politically towards the right. You know, that does have something to do with my family background and my interest in firearms and stuff like that. But it's also, I think a lot of it also had to do with Harry and how the state handled his case, I guess you would say, because he was they would give him food stamps. He would take the food stamps. He would sell the food stamps. He would use it to buy beer. They had full knowledge that he was using substances. So it was effectively the state was contributing and enabling his decline. And absolutely, myself and others tried to talk to Harry and to get him to stop, drinking himself to death, but to no avail. And I think by the end he probably wasn't cognizant. Probably didn't understand what was going on. But R.I.P. Harry Essex.